How do you feel about being called a TERF?
I think TERF is a slur. It's used to belittle women, to silence women, to shut them up, and it's used a lot by misogynist men on Twitter. And so anytime people call me a TERF, you know, I call them out on it. Now, if women themselves want to call themselves TERFs, that's, people want to reclaim words, whatever. I actually sometimes think this whole thing of reclaiming words is a bit of nonsense.
So where would you position yourself in the debate? What was it that kind of got you sort of thinking along these lines? Because I know you've got quite strong opinions, but
Never.
But I wanted to know what it was. Like they say, something piqued somebody. What was that thing? Or was there a point where, was there something that happened and you thought that I need to get involved in this debate?
The thing that got me involved in the debate, and again, I probably wouldn't say peaked, trans people have been part of my life forever. So it has actually been quite hard for me to step in and speak up because, as soon as you do, it's split into two sides of a very vicious culture war. But the thing that made me speak up was in Ireland, Amnesty published and promoted a letter which had been written by Transgender Equality Network Ireland, which demanded that the media and politicians deny legitimate representation to people who believe that there are two sexes. And that letter was a lot more than that. It was very authoritarian in its language. It wanted to silence people. It was saying people didn't have a political right to speak up. And it also did another thing, which would be hard for people outside Ireland maybe to understand how painful this was for me. But it also did a thing of saying that people who were speaking up were outsiders, foreigners, and they actually really meant kind of English.
Right.
My grandfather founded Amnesty, and my great-grandfather was executed in 1916 by the British Army for his part in the 1916 Rising. And his wife, well, ex-wife at the time, who's my great-grandmother, was actually born British, the daughter of a British Army colonel, but she fought for both people in poverty in Ireland, political prisoners in Ireland, and for the Irish state all of her life. And so there was just something so divisive in that letter.
So which part of Ireland was this?
I'm in the south, the Republic of Ireland.
Right, okay. So you've got to forgive my ignorance about the politics of, I only know like what you would know from an English perspective. So
no problem.
That was really fascinating. It's something I didn't know about you. And so do you think that this idea that the way that you were sort of, it feels like you were sort of told a way to think from a governing body somewhere else?
It was like this set of NGOs that decided there's a legitimate way to think about things, and that is that gender is what's important. And I totally buy that gender is important, and I think everybody should be able to express their gender the way they want to.
Yeah.
But I don't think we can say that sex is not important. Sex equally is important. And what happens then, Ireland brought self-ID back in the end of 2015, early 2016, and I supported it at the time because I felt it was right.
But has there been any negative consequences of that self-ID?
Well, there is the issue of violent trans women in prison, and I know not all women, not all trans women are violent. Clearly, not at all. But there is one very particularly violent trans woman in women's prison in Limerick. And that just needs to be discussed. And we need to work out how to house different prisoners. All of these things just need to be discussed. It's not a blanket, all trans women should be in male estate.
Now, I can appreciate that as an instance, as a safeguarding issue within a particular, because that's an individual case. But the problem I have is when people use those individual cases in arguments about self-ID overall outside of prisons and in real life. So the ordinary trans woman, the average, but they're not going to go to prison. We know there are violent and nasty people out there. They're not just in prisons. They're all over the place. Self-ID isn't going to make any difference to that. And I find that people weaponize these debates and use the word, prisons, toilets, sports, like I've said before, and they become performative arguments that, I mean, they're very important, don't get me wrong. In those particular instances where they are happening, that's important to those people. But overall, as a society, it's very specific to one set of individuals, but people will use those arguments as a weapon for all trans people.
I agree that those arguments are used as a weapon, but there is a kernel. But let me finish this one, Frida. There's a kernel of core importance in those arguments. So under equality legislation in Ireland, and I sort of know the UK situation, but not so well, but under equality legislation in Ireland, it is possible to protect same-sex spaces, both for men and for women. So that means that for certain kinds of things, so intimate care. So if I want to go to, which I don't really want to, but I ought to, go for, postnatal physiotherapy.
Right.
I do want to be able to say I want an actual woman to do that.
But
that I can do under current Irish equality law. However, self-ID has made that complex, and because they didn't figure those things out properly under self-ID, they now need to rewrite the laws to manage these things. Right. That's what the argument is about.
I could understand, that is a real concern. If you're a woman and you want only women, and there's obviously, if somebody is trans, there's a pathway of being trans. There's a sliding scale of where you start being trans, and it's very nebulous in that sense. But
is that why you call the podcast Gender Nebulous?
Yeah. Well,
okay.
It's just because I like that word, I think, because I was thinking of gender fluid, but I thought, no, that sounds wrong. But I was going to say to what you say, because I work in a medical setting, and there will be instances where I will be with a vulnerable person who may be female, and I've got to be careful, and I've got to be mindful of the fact that if she's just going to assume I'm female. Now, if she has specific needs and the specific safeguarding connected with that person, I will get back up. I will say, look, I need another person, another lady, another female member of staff to be with this person as well. And that is not me rejecting, saying I don't want to care for that person. It's respecting their reality. You know what I mean? So if somebody said to me, I don't want you because you're trans, I said, fine. It might take you a little bit longer to get care, but if that's what you want, that I should not be the person to say you have to have me, because if you don't, nobody's ever going to do that in a medical setting.
But the problem is I don't agree with you that nobody's ever going to do it. You see, and once the law is in place, then it's discrimination to say I don't want you because you're trans.
It depends, I suppose.
If there isn't those exceptions still under law, then it can't be upheld.
Yeah, I understand. Well, what I'm trying to say is that if somebody said to me, I don't want you to care, I don't want your help because you're trans, then I'm not going to push that.
But I don't think people should legitimately be able to say to you that they don't want your help because they're trans, other than in very defined circumstances, right? Because you're entitled to equality protections as well.
Yeah.
So, and it is just in these very defined circumstances. So I think a rape crisis centre should be able to have a same-sex group as well as mixed gender groups or same gender groups, right?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think,
but if we don't maintain the equality protection around sex as a characteristic, as opposed to conflating it with gender, then we can't do those things.
But the problem with that is, like, say if something happened to me, say I was, I mean, I could be sexually assaulted in public. Absolutely. And I have to go. And so where would I go? You know, I mean.
But I mean, the women I know who work in rape crisis who are concerned about not being able to offer same-sex groups want to support you as well. Like, that's not an issue, right?
But I understand. So the point you're making is, like, say if women need specifically female-only spaces.
Sometimes.
Right. But in that argument has to come the question that if I'm fully, you know, I'm legally female, I present as female, I'm subject to the same systemic misogyny, I could be subject to the same sex crime, then if I need help, where do I go?
But I'm not saying have exclusive female-only spaces. I'm saying that we
Right.
need to reserve
But,
some spaces.
but we also know that there is so much underfunding. There's just not enough space. I mean, these things are
Well, welcome to womanhood.
Yeah, well, this is, we know where the problems lie, and it's not, the problems don't lie in trans women. The problems lie in systemic misogyny and the lack of funding and the lack of the government understanding what women's needs are.
Oh no, they understand perfectly well. They understand perfectly well. So, that's, for instance, why maybe it's okay to fund HRT for trans people, but if you fund HRT, what you call HRT for trans women, I probably wouldn't. But if you fund HRT for menopausal women, that means you're going to have to pay for it for every woman, right? That's a much bigger population. So, there are lots of things that impact women that aren't just to do with structural misogyny against feminine stereotypes. Women lose their jobs, have pay cut, even despite the fact that employment law shouldn't allow this after they have babies.
But are these the fault of trans women?
No, of course not. And I don't think any woman is saying they're the fault of trans women. But what we're saying is there's specific things about being a woman, about being a woman that can't be erased. I hear that you don't want to erase those things fully, right?
No.
Or even at all.
I would like to think that a high tide lifts all boats. So when women fight for things, they're also fighting for, all women. It's like, even though we can establish that I wasn't born female and I didn't opt into being trans, there are certain rights that all women should have based on gender, not sex.
I'm happy to agree with that. And then I'm saying there are a specific set of rights that women should have based on sex.
But don't you want to also see that certain people in the media, I'm not going to get you to comment on individuals, but I will say someone like Helen Joyce and Maya Forstater, they are weaponizing these debates, and they're not actually doing anything for women. They're not actually doing anything for women on the ground or in rape crisis centers or in healthcare or in anything. What their whole mission seems to be to exclude trans women. Now, if that's what they want to do, great, you crack on and you try and if you want to say trans women are men, you say that, but don't try and drag a load of people along with you on a moralistic argument. That's my point.
I mean, I'm just going to say that you would be surprised, but Helen is very pragmatic, and she is the very person who said that women on the gender critical side are going to need to wake up and be prepared to make compromises because we do have to work these things out. You and I think that we all need to make compromises because you've accepted that there are instances where women should have, for dignity reasons or for other reasons, have things that are related to their sex.
Of course, sex. If you say sex matters, what you're saying is I have to understand that my body is different to your body because of genetics. I had a letter from my doctor last week asking me to go for a smear test, and I had to ring him up and say, look, don't waste people's time. I'm not coming for a smear test. But this is the kind of thing that's the difference, So,
but isn't that why it's a little bit daft that we can't recognize sex and gender?
No, we can recognize sex and gender, and I've.
But the whole, and I'm not going to use the word ideology, because I don't really like that ideology word very much either, and I also don't like ideologies on principle.
No.
But it is certainly the case that LGBTQ politics has advocated for the erasure of sex in these things, right? Stonewall has, and the same here in Ireland with our LGBTQ.
I can understand it because I hear. Is that your dog bark? I think your dog's gender critical. What I was going to say, you hear these stories about women referred to as pregnant people. Uterus habit. I don't know.
It's insulting.
But I don't really think that. I mean, that's a very sort of tabloid kind of
No, but it really
report.
hurts, Frida. You see, I think you really, I understand how hurt you are by the rhetoric and the shouting and the viciousness. But I think sometimes that trans people don't understand how very hurt women feel too.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm not saying I'm not empathetic. That's what I was saying. I would be if I felt like I was being referred to in a pejorative way, then obviously if you don't want to be called a pregnant person. But the women, because I work for the ambulance service. I'm in and out of hospitals all the time. And we just people refer to each other the way they prefer to be referred to. Now,
and that's what should happen.
But sometimes in literature, in pamphlets and things the NHS put out that have stonewall advice, they might just put pregnant people, and it's not because they're trying to hurt women, it's because they're trying to include as many people as they can.
I know, but it would just be inclusive to say women and other
but this is why they have language, they have pamphlets in Urdu and they have pamphlets in Braille. It doesn't mean
and I expect in Urdu that they don't say pregnant people because they understand that people in Urdu won't have a clue what they're fucking talking about. And there's also people who are reading English who don't have a clue what they're talking about. I don't know about
that. I mean, that might suggest that people who speak Urdu are not being
that is not what I intended to suggest, and I think you know that. But
no, but people who speak Urdu can also be trans, and people that are, what I was saying is, what the point I'm trying to make is that when people put out pamphlets and literature, they do it in as inclusive way as possible. And
but that is actually not the best public health approach. The best public health approach is to do leaflets and education specifically for targeted groups that need to hear the information in certain ways. And so if you want to hear what's performative is pregnant people is performative. That is generally performative.
But I can understand why they would say that, because obviously trans men could be pregnant, and it's going to be
trans men can be pregnant, but let's really be honest here, how many trans men get pregnant? Seriously.
So really, you are
and
right.
the trans men that are getting pregnant have to do this in a very, very conscious way, which is coming off testosterone, returning to having a menstrual cycle, and trying to get pregnant.
I don't know too much about that.
Well, I do, because I know a lot more about trans men than I do about trans women.
Okay, well, I'll adhere to that. But what I'm saying is that I do agree with you that these things are performative, maybe, and they do lean too heavily into what people might call political correctness. And political correctness isn't a negative thing, but it can seem patronizing to certain people.
I think sometimes it can seem performative, but absolutely that absolutely public health should be targeting different communities,
but I think
with health messages.
Another thing is we've got layers and layers of managers and sub-managers, and they sign things off, and they probably just not really thinking about the people they're actually serving. And that's not a problem of trans people. That's not a problem of women. It's just a problem of the whole kind of culture that we live in.
But at the heart of it is this core thing around the erasure of sex from a policy and legal perspective, right? And so what women who are a certain class of feminists who believe that sex is material, as I do, because I've experienced it as being material in my life. I've experienced discrimination based on the fact that I'm a woman, not a feminine stereotype. And I've also experienced sexual violence, and I've needed to make use of those kind of spaces. But I don't think I owe the public the stories of my trauma to explain why I wish to be examined by a woman, why I wish to go to a female therapist. I don't think I owe society explanations of my trauma for that. I think I should have that protection simply because I'm a woman. However, I think trans people should have absolutely all of the protections in society for employment, for everything. And then there is just this tiny, tiny portion, collision of rights, tiny collision that should be sorted out. But people in authority as such aren't willing to take responsibility for that because they don't want to deal with anger from both sides. And so they're just kind of coasting through, hoping that, you know, enough people will shut up and that these things won't really be a problem.
Well, you should never shut up, you know, and I agree with you there. But the problem, like I've said before, especially on Twitter, it's very hard to have a reasonable conversation about
it's impossible
this
on Twitter.
because obviously there's a very adversarial trans side, and then there's an adversarial what we call turf side, or whatever you want to call it, and a lot of those people, they're not.
I just call it women's rights side.
But
it's not all women's rights. I will agree with you on that.
I'm sure there are people like you that are genuinely, you know, I don't doubt that you have these genuine concerns, but there are also people on the right who are co-opting these issues because they just want trans people not to exist.
Yes, there are. Well, I don't know that I'm not sure that they want trans people not to exist as such. But they want all people who are not conforming to certain specific requirements, which will include trans people. It'll include same-sex attracted people. It'll include same gender attracted people. It will include lone mothers. It will include people who are, you know, maybe mentally ill. It'll include all sorts of things. So, I mean,
but my
people on the far right are not our friends at all.
Oh, no. But my proposition to you is that trans women are not the enemy. They're not the problem in this.
I don't think trans women are the enemy.
But
that's why I'm happy to talk to you. I don't think of you as an enemy at all.
No, well, on a personal level, but when
No, I don't even mean I mean on a general level. I don't think trans women are the enemy. But I think that this move to like I say, erase sex. So if we can have sex and gender as protected characteristics and we resolve where there are these collisions, then we would all be okay, I think.
Well, I think like when I first started to sort of interact with you a little bit, I noticed you were sharing things that were quite on the very sort of turfy side of things. And I wasn't sure.
Turf is a slur.
But I wasn't sure if you were doing that to provoke or you wanted to start a debate around that. But you do lean into that. And that's why I wanted to talk to you. Because when you lean into that, you lean into trans exclusion. And I can't get away from that. I can't not bring that up with you, because that would mean I'm ignoring the reason I wanted to talk to you in the first place. So when you do share things that are definitely, you know, they seek to demonize trans people, then why do you do that? Do you do that because...
Well, I mean, I'm not going to be hauled over the coals for my Twitter, and I'm not going to haul you over the coals for your Twitter or some of the things you say and do.
Oh, don't do that. No, I will admit to you, I have been pretty nasty on Twitter, and I regret some of the things I've said on Twitter. But it's because I think when you're constantly bombarded with, you know, these kind of the same things all the time, you sort of build up this kind of shell, and you fire these things off. And
I get that, and you know, so you have to offer me the same thing. I don't think I am. I genuinely really try very hard not to be nasty on Twitter. I try never to personalize things. I have certainly said things about Eddie Izzard that I will never take back, because I absolutely think Eddie Izzard is, I think he's harmful to trans people as well as
I think Eddie Izzard is who she is, and if she wants to be she, that's fine by me. But I understand that, you know, she can, I say she because she wants to be known as she, but I've known Eddie Izzard as he for the longest time, and I kept making the mistake of calling him he, but it's because it's sort of a fixed thing in your mind. But I don't know if Eddie Izzard is a positive figure. I don't know. I just listen to some of the things she says, and I think that sounds all right. But whether she's a
well, I noticed that he chooses to be a man for high-paid movie roles. And as a middle-aged woman or an older woman, those roles are not available to women because of structural misogyny.
But that's not Eddie's fault.
No, but Eddie leans into it, doesn't he?
Yeah, well, he can choose. Yeah, so you're saying he chooses to act male when it suits him.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay. Well, yeah, I can agree with you there.
And
but
you were saying you're a trans woman, and that you I mean, and of course you could decide not to be at some stage, maybe, I don't know, but for you that is a fairly permanent identity, I feel, in talking to you.
Yeah, but I always say nobody's ever sure of anything 100% ever.
Well, I think that's true too.
And
I also think that that's one of the problems with this whole gender discourse, is that we've tried to lock people into gender expressions as well.
You've got to understand that people do opt in to a political stance, whereas people don't necessarily opt into being trans. It's just innate.
Yeah, but trans people opt into political stances as well. So I know many trans people who don't agree with the political stance of a lot of the trans activists, you know. They haven't opted into some of the politics of LGBTQ politics at the moment.
I've been called out by other trans women for the things I've said. And the things I've said tend to center around the fact that, yes, I am different. I'm not a woman in the sense that you are a woman. And I acknowledge that difference, because there will be moments when that's important. But another thing is, like, I mean, I use words like tranny and, you know, and I get in trouble for that all the time. But that's just my way of talking about myself. I would never aim that at somebody else. But I think
why do you use the word tranny?
Because I find it hilarious. I call myself a mad tranny all the time. But I spent a lot of my time being a drag queen when I was younger. And that world is full of vicious humor, and
it certainly is full of vicious humor.
But you see, when I came out as trans, one thing that did strike me as interesting is a lot of the gay men I knew said, "No, you're not trans," because it kind of made them doubt whether they were gay, because they said, "Well, you can't be a woman because you're a boy," you know. And it was like, well, why not? But I understand these things are really. There's a point where they verge on the ridiculous.
There is, and I think if more of us could talk about those points with some sense of humor and some graciousness, we actually might make it someplace.
Yeah,
Twitter is not that place, right? We can accept that Twitter is not that place. And you know, when you asked would I talk to you, I was like, oh yeah. Well, but I'm happy to talk to you.
We had some nice chats on Twitter, and I thought, you know, you weren't nasty. But we disagree, I think.
We disagree profoundly on lots of things.
I think because I was going to call you out on some of your tweets, but I've decided, no, I'm not going to do that, because you could call me out on a lot of tweets. But the point I wanted to make is that trans women, as a class of whatever it is, wherever we are very defensive on Twitter, because there are so few of us, really, and all we want is to be because hate crime is a real thing. Like, I could be singled out, but I mean, I've been approached by men in clubs, and it's been like a sexual harassment kind of situation. And when they realize I'm trans, it becomes this aggressive situation, and I think this is why we kind of build these defense mechanisms. So when people come at us and say, because there are a lot of people, you know, you'll watch like GB News and Talk TV, and there are a lot of talking points about trans people all the time, trans this, trans that. And I'm thinking, why is everybody talking about us? You know, because it's this culture war thing that's going on. And
I mean, I've experienced hate crime too, and I'm never going to diminish the impact on us of that. And you know, obviously I'm walking down the street by myself don't experience hate crime, but I've experienced hate crime walking down the street with my lover. And you know, I'm often with very butch women, and when people realize that's a woman like me with a woman like that can cause very similar kinds of aggression.
Well, people are making assumptions
to what you're describing, and it makes us all as humans feel like nothing and worthless, and like that we have no value, and so it's really horrible. So I absolutely understand how very hard it must be being trans on Twitter.
But I think we lean into it as well, because I'm quite gobby, you see. There's some people,
yeah, you are.
There will be there will be people who are trans. You'll never know they're trans. They'll never even think about it politically. They'll just get on with their lives and blah blah blah. But for people like me, we sort of lean into the politics of it, and it's not because we just want to argue with people. It's because we feel there's something worth fighting for, and it's kind of this kind of, I think it's a human need to sort of be present in the world as your authentic self, whatever that is. So when you've been,
I really get that, and I think the thing that you have to get as well is that is the same for a lot of women.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying it's not. I'm saying
so it's like two sides of the same coin. So I think we all have to look at structurally what's going on and who benefits from this culture war, right?
Yeah, I think also,
and I don't think it's trans women that benefit from the culture war, or trans men, but I don't think it's women either.
I think another thing is that I've been thinking about recently is a lot of trans women or trans people women transition all the time through their lives anyway. Do you know what I mean? From puberty to maybe if you go through, if you have children, then you've got menopause.
We do go through lots of transitions.
And these are real transitions, and they're hormonal transitions. They change the way you feel about yourself. And I think that is something, because when people talk about transition, it's sort of a very literal thing when you're talking about trans people, because we electing to change our bodies. We don't have to. I mean, there are trans women that will never have any surgeries and never take hormones. They're just happy, identifying as female. So you do opt into that. You do opt in. The doctor will say, do you want to take hormones? And you'll have a decision. You go on then. And then they'll say, well, these are the side effects. This is the pros and cons. And you make a decision. And but like, I think one of the conflicts is women don't opt into that. They have these hormonal fluctuations. I mean, I know men have some hormonal fluctuations.
Yeah, but not the same.
But women they transition all the time, and I think that's something that some trans people don't appreciate. I don't know if that's something that makes any sense, but
it does, and I think that is part of what that we at times feel is being erased by breaking us out into these different aspects of our reproductive systems.
Yeah,
when people say pregnant person, the point for me is that whether I have a child or not, and I do have children, but whether I had children or not, I have been in relationship to the fact that my body, from the time I start menstruating at the age of 14 or 15, that I can become pregnant until I finally stop menstruating.
Yeah.
And that is a thing that is very large in our psyches, because we have to protect ourselves against becoming pregnant when it won't work for us. So we have to deal with what happens if we don't want to carry a pregnancy to term. We have to deal with our children that we raise, that came out of our bodies. That this is a really fundamental experience, and then people come up with these stupid things, and I know that's Twitter, but stupid things on Twitter. Are you saying a woman who hasn't had a baby isn't a woman? And it's like, duh, I know no.
Yeah, I can understand that frustration, and also like, this is why what I think is meant by sex matters, because your gender, you can opt into, I suppose, whereas your sex is, you don't have much choice about that, and
none,
and your experience is defined by it. And so when somebody's going to come along and take that away and say, look, no, it's just gender, you don't, that is a real problem. I can see that, but I still maintain that when people direct this stuff at trans women, it's not trans women that's the problem. It's systemic misogyny. I mean, you might have arguments with trans women online because of it, but that's because they are also, frustrated about their situation. It's not because they hate any particular...
I think there is a systemic misogyny that dislikes feminine presentations as such. So I think there is that, but there is also this thing that, I suppose I think that comes out of a misogyny towards women based on their sex. But I think and you can correct me from your experience of the gay male community, but I think in the gay male community, women who present, or men who present as sort of femi, whatever, I don't know what words you would use, are not revered as men who present as masculine. And I can tell you in the women's community that butch women are much more revered than femme women, right? So there is this prizing of, I suppose, some idea of masculinity in the world, and like a debasing of some idea of femininity, and that this creates lots of problems for all of us, men, women, trans men, etc.
I mean, I must say some of the worst misogyny I've ever heard has come out of the mouths of gay men. And I don't know why.
I agree, and I think there's a lot of straight allies out there that don't understand that.
Because I mean, there was a really bitchy post on Twitter recently. They were laughing at some Russian woman's hairstyle because she was this very brutal-looking Russian woman, you know, very stern-looking with this crazy kind of bouffant hair. And that was the first woman in space, and they didn't know that, and they were laughing at that woman's looks. I was like, you've got no fucking idea what you're talking. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, so I've seen lots of misogyny from gay men.
But that's
not all gay men, of course.
Oh, but, you've always got.
But as a class, or as a thing in the culture, it's there.
But I think so. I think from this conversation.
Can I just say, and it was funny because I was also talking to a trans man recently, and who fully passes and lives his life as a man, and he was talking about, Jesus, you've no idea how men talk about women when there's no women around. So I'm assuming that I've only heard that misogyny from gay men because I've been around gay men, and I haven't been in all straight men company without a woman being present. So that misogyny is very rife. And I do agree that it impacts trans women as well. But it's still the fact that sex matters. Gender matters too, but sex matters.
But I think as socially, in the social, like in the professional world, and your social life and your relationship, it is gender that we interact with, because all of our language is gendered. You know, every kind of word to describe a woman and every word to describe a man is based on gendered language. You know,
well, you could say it's based on sexed language,
but it's not, because you've got, like, you know, you've got bloke, lad, fella, bitch, woman, girl. You know, all these different words are gendered. They're not based on your sex. They're based on a personality kind of gender.
I think
you don't. Well, what I'm saying is, when you meet somebody, you don't interact with their sex. You interact with how they present to you. And we're sensory beings. So we look at somebody and we scan them up and down, and we go, yeah, she. and if it's natural for you to say she or her or miss or madam, you will. Because we're working on a sensory level. We're not looking at.
But I think our primary sensory level is reacting to the sex of the person.
But we don't know the sex of the person, do we? By looking.
I think a lot of the time in the interactions we do, and I've lived a lot in very genderqueer communities where
but you don't...
and been, you know, what we would have called passing women back in the day. So women who pass as men on first glance, but I still know they're a woman very quickly, and I like that.
Yeah.
So I don't agree with you that it's just gender, but I do agree that for some people gender is the most important thing. But you see, you and me, we like gendered expressions, right? You like to express your gender. I like to express gender. I don't, you know. But there are people for whom gender doesn't read very much.
Can I ask you, would appearing butch appeal to you? Would that be something?
Me, no, I'd get total gender dysphoria if I have to wear a hoodie.
Really? All right. Sorry, I had to ask. So
no way. I literally couldn't do it. Like back in the day of the early drag king shows in San Francisco, and I was helping my friends dress up as drag kings to win. Wow. And they're like, come on, Iseult. I'm like, no way. No way.
So you're a very feminine kind of, well, you know, however you want to present. But
well, I would say I'm very femme, but I don't think that means you know, I just think that that doesn't mean I buy into a whole bunch of dumb stereotypes.
That's true. But I was going to
But
say,
I want to express my gender in certain ways.
how do you feel about this idea that I've heard said that like women that would have been butch, like who present as butch, be happy to be women, but and now girls might be, you know, influenced maybe to be trans. So I've heard this said that, you know, in the past, you know, tomboys would be tomboys and that they'd be happy with that. But now there's this gender thing that's kind of as if it's kind of promoted online and stuff. So some girls are going to opt into wanting to be boys. I just wondered if you thought that was a reality or that's just
I do think it's reality, but I think that some girls who might initially present butch may also want to be trans men, and that's a valid choice too. But I think when the culture pushes it one way, it sort of makes it like it doesn't seem there's an option. And so I do work with adolescents and young people, and I have talked to young people who have felt pushed down gender pathways and weren't given, you know, you can't be what you don't see, right? You know, so if all we see is the option for a sort of a mask presenting girl is to become trans, and she doesn't see role models of butch lesbians who are happy in themselves, she can't become that. So it's just, how do we create it so that pathway and choice is there? So, you know, I don't believe that all women who once lived as butch lesbians who transitioned have done so incorrectly either. Right. I know many who have and enjoy their lives, right? So I just think these things are complex.
It is complex.
So I don't buy into all of those talking points that it's all one thing or another. It's sort of like we've swung around to where sort of rigid gender stereotypes are almost enforced by this new gender, as opposed to allowing us to be nebulous about gender. And I think it would be great if we could be gender nebulous. We didn't have to be so religious about gender.
Well, that's why I call the podcast. So me and Vicky.
Well, I like that name. Yeah. I'm really rolling with it.
See, the reason for me, I mean, I don't because I don't know if I conform to any stereotypes, because when I was growing up, one of my heroes was Calamity Jane. And I just look, but and when she put the frock on at the end, I was really disappointed. Because I thought there's a woman, because a lot of my female kind of, the women that I used to love Ruby Wax, I still love Ruby Wax. And the reason I like Ruby Wax, she was just really sort of, she wasn't feminine, but she was beautiful and she was funny. And I love that about her. And I like female comedians, I think, because of that. And it's just because they're not self-deprecating, but they understand that their femininity is, you know, something they can wear or take off. And that appealed to me when I was young. So female, like somebody like Jenny Eclair, somebody like Ruby Wax really appealed to me. One of my favorite comedians of all time, it was Hilda Baker.
I don't even know who Hilda Baker is.
She was from Bolton, and she was like, this was in the 1960s. So she was one of the first solo female comedians. She came out of the musical tradition. Oh, I think your dog's.
Yeah.
So I think we've covered quite a lot there, and you didn't shout at me.
You didn't shout at me, though. You kept calling me a turf.
You didn't call me a man in a dress. But you are naughty on Twitter, you know.
I am, but so are you.
Well, thank you for doing that. I mean, I didn't want you to think I was trying to, you know, coax you into saying, you know, or trying to trap you.
No, look, that was a good conversation, I think.
So, well, thank you for doing it, and hopefully we'll stay in touch on Twitter. And
well, maybe we'll stay in touch in real life.
Yeah. Okay. Is there anything you want to ask me before we go? No.
I mean, off the podcast, right? Not recorded.
What's that?
Just you know, what was the transition for you like, having been sort of gay man drag and then going to to being a trans woman, did you lose friends? Did you lose community?
I did a little bit because I had to pull myself away from what was quite an intense, kind of drug-fueled world where it wasn't good for my mental health for a while. And it's like it's quite a lot. My transition story is quite long because my mum took me to a child psychologist when I was 17 because I kept saying I wanted to be my sister.
So you had gender dysphoria for a long time.
Yeah, but the way I expressed myself was by going out at the weekend, and then I'd have a regular job in the week, and at the weekend I'd be this amplified, kind of ridiculous version of a woman. Well, that's not sustainable, is it?
No.
So it burnt me out a little bit. So
yeah, but so you had sort of longer term gender dysphoria, and so for you transitioning has really worked.
But I've also had relationships with women. Like I'd say I'm bisexual because I had a long relationship with a girl, but she wanted things out of life I don't think I was going to be able to give her, and I realized that, and she realized that because we just became mates. But yeah, so.
And I mean, I'm bisexual. So are you sort of straight down the line bisexual, or?
I tend to prefer men.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I have I think women for companionship. Like I go on holidays and nights out with girls, but if it comes down to the actual mechanics of sex, without being too blunt, that I think that is men, yeah.
Yeah, I prefer butch women. That's what I like the best. But okay, whatever.
Okay, well, we got a bit personal at the end. I won't ask you anything like that, honestly. But So are you in a relationship with a woman, or
just broke up about 2 months ago?
Oh, sorry to hear that.
Yeah, bummer dude.
Well, you're happy with your little dogs.
Yeah, happy with my little dogs. Yeah.
Right. Well,
look, life's weird at times. Look, you know what? It was fun to talk to you, and we both that was good. Look, right. We'll probably both get attacked.
Well, it was lovely to talk to you, and thanks for doing it. And I'm gonna get something to eat now because I'm starving.
Okay.
All right. Bye.
Bye.